Hey everyone, welcome to Be Our Guest, a weekly virtual happy hour with industry professionals. I'm Dev Janki. I am the artistic director of Live and in Color. We are a not-for-profit theater company based both in New York and Connecticut. Our mission is to develop new plays and musicals that promote and celebrate diversity. Before we bring on our very special guest, I want to remind everyone that we are currently in the rolling premiere of our commissioned virtual play, Days of Recreation. Weather Vane Theater and Out of the Box Theatrics just produced a beautiful rendition of this play this past Sunday evening. If you missed it, don't worry. There are still 2 more productions from partner theaters for you to see. The dates are Friday, September 25th, produced by Bennington Performing Arts Center and Old Castle Theater Company in association with Bennington College. And then on Wednesday, September 30th, produced by the Philadelphia Theater Company. You don't want to miss those amazing performances. Also, we are currently 14 days into our Put Artists Back to Work fundraising campaign. 100% of the proceeds we raise between now and September 30th will go towards paying artists to work on new virtual theater projects that Live and in Color has been developing. We have a $20,000 matching grant from 2 anonymous donors, and we've raised $10,000, which means we have 7 days left to raise another $10,000 to meet our match. So please head over to theaterincolor.org to donate today. Now, grab a cocktail and start leaving your questions in the comments. It's time to welcome an incredible person. You may know him as Wes from a tiny little TV show called Glee. You also know him from Broadway shows such as Aladdin, Rent, Flower Drum Song, In Transit, Godspell, and Allegiance. Please welcome the amazing Telly Leung.
Hi, Dev.
Hi, welcome.
Thanks. I'm so thrilled to be here. Dev, first of all, I've done a lot of these events on StreamYard, a lot of these chats, and I think you win the award for the best opening credits music. Like that opening credits
great,
that was
right?
edited so beautifully of all of this great footage from Brigham Camp and all that. It's awesome.
That's
it's
all
really
Dennis
awesome.
Corsi, our director of new works, who's a brilliant little filmmaker.
Dennis, brilliant. I need lessons. I need Final Cut Pro lessons.
Oh yeah, he's the best. So thank you for being here. How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah,
well, yeah, I'm good. I'm drinking, so I'm better. So it's
all right.
Yeah.
Where are you joining us from? Are you in New York?
I am in New York City. I live in Hell's Kitchen. I live 2 blocks from Times Square. So this is my home. New York is my home. I know that there was sort of a mass exodus out of New York, and definitely New York is quieter. But I'm from here. I'm a native New Yorker. My parents live in Brooklyn. I grew up in Brooklyn. I went to high school in Manhattan. I've made my home here. So I'm not going anywhere. Yeah, I'm not going anywhere. This is it. I'm here. I'm here. Good times and bum times. I've seen them all. I'm here for all of it.
Your next role. So I know you've been super busy during the quarantine. You're sort of all over the place. And I want to start out by you recently filmed an incredible concert at Birdland Jazz Club.
Yay!
Tell us about that whole experience.
Well, I as a performer, as a Broadway performer, I'm not always lucky enough to be on Broadway all the time. So ever since I started working on Broadway and realizing, you're not always in a Broadway show all the time, especially as an actor of color. There's just not that many shows for us to do, and not that many opportunities to be working consistently like that. So especially in my 20s, I was like, you know what, I'm going to develop a club act for myself. So doing nightclubs and jazz clubs and getting together with some of my favorite musicians that I've met along the way in Broadway pits, who are great arrangers and great music directors and just great musicians, and coming together to sort of create new music or new arrangements of songs that we love. That's always been my side project and my side hustle. And so while I do a lot of Broadway and performing on a stage and acting out as characters, I also just love being me on a nightclub stage. And so I've performed at Birdland a ton. And with all of the performing arts venues being shut down and all of that, what the Birdland people really brilliantly did, Jim Caruso and Gianni Valenti, the owner of Birdland, they turned the Birdland Theater downstairs, their brand new gorgeous space, into a TV studio. So there's three
Wow.
cameras there. There's sound, there's everything is mic'd. And they're doing it in a safe and socially distanced way. So the only people there's no audience. The only people there are the performers, the musicians, and frankly, they try to limit it to only one musician. I got away with having two musicians because my music director, Gary Adler, brought his partner, JJ Johnson, who plays viola, and I said, it's still only two quarantine bubbles on this stage. Is that okay?
Exactly.
He said, yes, bring JJ. So I lucked out. I have piano and viola. And there's the sound guys in the back mixing the sound. There's the camera folks. Jim is there, and that's it. So we built an entire evening of song where it wasn't about interacting with an audience, which is sort of what cabaret artists do, is we play off a crowd. I was like, oh gosh, I got to play off this camera. I have to play off to everybody at home. And of course, very nerve-wracking experience because as performers, we're used to applause. We're used to buttoning a number, getting the reaction or landing laughs. Well, knowing that none of that was going to happen, I sort of was like, you know what? I have to rethink my nightclub act in a way where it's just talking to the people at home and being with them in actually an even more intimate way than in being in a nightclub of 100 people in Birdland Theater. So I made it as really, I think it's by far the most intimate show I've done because I really am talking to you sitting in your living room in your pajamas drinking white wine,
It sounds amazing. And can you please let everyone know that they can still see it? Give them all the info.
It's still available on demand via Broadway World. So if you go to the Broadway World site and you click on all the on-demand stuff, you'll see there's a whole bunch of virtual performances there. There's a Birdland section where folks like me have done live at Birdland shows. Seth Rudetsky has a whole bunch of shows there that he's been hosting. Yeah. But my show is going to be available to stream until October 3rd. And it's only $20. So just know, if you were to see me at Birdland, it actually costs more than that, with the drink minimum and all that. So actually, it's a really wonderful way to sort of, and I did. My music director Gary and we specifically structured a show in a way where it was where we talk to the people at home, and we sort of deal with everything that's happening in the world and see how you're doing, and also just escape a little bit with some music,
Well, I'm sure you have lots of fans watching, but for those of you who don't know Telly is such an extraordinary performer and truly has one of my favorite male voices in the industry. I will come hear you do anything, anytime. So thanks, go check it out. So I want to, before you were a big Broadway star and a cabaret star and everything you're doing, I want to start at the beginning in Brooklyn. Being in the city, were you exposed to a lot of theater at a young age?
I grew up with immigrant parents. My mom was a seamstress in the garment factories of Chinatown, and my dad worked in Chinese restaurants. So, coming from Hong Kong, they were born in China, but they went to Hong Kong. They didn't know what Broadway was, even though I lived in New York City. So because they didn't know what Broadway was, I didn't know what Broadway was. So theater sort of found me because my parents, I had sort of a tiger mom who was very adamant about academics and she was like, Telly, you have to study hard. So no cartoons after school. You only can watch PBS because it's educational. So I did. I studied hard, and when I was done with my homework, I could watch PBS as a kid. Well, so I watched a lot of Sesame Street, our dear friend Alan. I watched a lot of 3-2-1 Contact and Square One, but I also watched great performances. And the first Broadway show I ever saw was Into the Woods.
Wow.
That original company. And I remember being 8 years old and watching PBS because it was the only thing I was allowed to watch and not understanding what was going on. I was like, I know these characters because I've read Little Red Riding Hood and I've read, Cinderella, and I've read Jack and the Beanstalk, but they're singing. These songs are funny. They're landing jokes. Wait, this is live? Like, where is this? Like, at 8 years old, my curiosity was sparked. Also that I just knew I loved it. At that age. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that was musical theater. And I always said that that was my moment where I found religion, and sure. My version of God was Stephen Sondheim. That's all it was,
Well, so when did you discover it was just across the bridge and you could buy a ticket and go see it?
So it was my junior high teacher. Back in the day they used to have twofers, cheap tickets for, especially for the big, the giant musicals that have been running for years and years. So you could get a $15 ticket to Les Mis, or Phantom, and my junior high teacher brought us for the very first time to a Broadway show, and it was Cats. And that was the first time I ever saw a live Broadway show. And that's when I realized, there's like, first of all, Times Square back then was not safe to walk around. So like, it wasn't like I was going out to the city by myself. Like I just didn't know that there was a whole neighborhood where this happened, where this happens every night at 8 o'clock. It's just like, there's all these different 40 shows are happening at the same time. And so my first Broadway show was Cats. I might have seen you in Cats.
What year? Yeah. What year?
I have to dig that up, but I bet you it was like 1989 or 1990. I remember.
I was probably, yeah. Go ahead.
Were you in it? I remember I think it was Laurie Beachman.
Yeah, I did it with Laurie.
So I might have seen you do it, because I just remember like being like, who is this woman singing Memory? And I know, that was my first experience, like going back into a playbill and being like, who is that? And I just remember sitting in, the junior high kids are sitting in the last row, right? Because it's the theater matinee, right?
Yeah.
It's Wednesday matinee. But like, I remember like sitting in that last row, and her voice, I felt her voice out, not with the amplification. I felt her voice in my chest. That's how big her voice was in that Winter Garden Theater, which is not a small theater. So I just remember having that feeling of being like, I feel her voice like on my body. Like that's how powerful her voice was.
She was truly extraordinary. And during that whole Cats thing is when she was fighting cancer. So she was really sick during that whole thing and doing that performance. It was really kind of extraordinary.
I wouldn't know that till much later. I guess as I was sort of researching about her life, and then of course hearing about her passing, being like, oh my God, I remember saying that to myself. I must have seen her in Cats when she was sick, and I can't believe that she, and now knowing how hard 8 times a week is, knowing how hard that show schedule is, and knowing that she still did that is sort of amazing.
Yeah, no, she was an extraordinary woman. I feel blessed to have been on the stage with her, I want to talk a little bit more about your education. You got to go, you attended Carnegie Mellon University School of Drama. Many amazing Broadway people have come out of that school. Talk a little bit about those 4 years and how did it shape you as an artist?
Yeah, I have to say Carnegie Mellon was actually one of the hardest things I've ever done. It is, when it comes to theater training, it is very rigorous. You wake up early in the morning, 7, 8 in the morning. You are in an acting class for 4 hours, 3 times a week at 9 a.m. So from 9 to 10, 10 to 11, 11 to 12, 12 to 1, you are in a scene study class. And that is really the strength of that program, I think, is that their musical theater students take all of the classes that the acting majors take, plus 4 days a week they have a dance class, plus they have their voice lesson, plus they have their music theory like classes. So it's on top of all of this stuff that is already a very rigorous major at Carnegie Mellon, the acting major. The music theater majors are sort of double majors. But to me, it was great because when you were in an acting class 4 hours a week for 3 days a week, we were there with those actors. We were there with directors too. So in many ways, I credit Carnegie Mellon with sort of being the foundation of my training. I always say, now that you and I both teach, I always say I still, even though I teach, I still am a student. I never stop being a student. And so, but as far as the foundation of what it is that I do and what I count on every day as an artist, it's Carnegie Mellon, and I have them to credit for that. I will also say this, though, that, being an actor of color, sometimes there were moments where I felt like they would look at me and go, we don't know what to do with you. In some ways that I feel like the industry sometimes would look at people of color or people and go, we don't necessarily know where to place you. So I was cast as a lot of old people and like character-y actors. I was cast as a lot of things I probably wouldn't be cast as in the industry, but it was part of my training. So in some ways I loved the opportunity to stretch and do that. And, but oftentimes it was, what do we do with him? Well, we'll put him in the chorus of Antigone. Because that's always where you put, like, the actors, we don't know what to do anything with. And it's so funny because I remember talking to Billy Porter, who ended up being my teacher when he was there, because he was an alum too. And I had just, in my senior year, I had just done the chorus of Antigone. And he said, when I was at Carnegie Mellon, I was in the chorus of Antigone. Like,
you're in good company.
Totally. And then he ended up coming and directing my senior thesis show, which was Company.
Yeah.
And they had double cast Bobby. And I don't know if, I love all of my teachers there and they gave me phenomenal training. I don't know if they ever saw me as a leading man because I just think that the industry didn't have very many leading men that looked like me. So they would never think of me as Bobby and company. And then Billy Porter comes to direct a show, somebody from the outside, somebody from the industry who had graduated from this institution, who had sort of gone through many of the same, like, where do I fit, in this program that is steeped in tradition. And he goes, I want Telly to do it. And he has confessed to me. He says the faculty turned to him and went, Telly? Are you sure? He's like, yes, I want Telly. That's who I want to do it. And so he ended up being a wonderful, not only a wonderful director on that show, but a great mentor and friend, continues to be a great friend, and mentor and sort of an amazing, I mean, you worked with Billy, like there's nobody like him and nobody with that generous of a spirit.
Absolutely. I want to jump to like your Broadway, your amazing Broadway credits. You were a huge Rent fan growing up, right? As well. How exciting was it for you when you were cast in the final run of the show on Broadway? There's
oh
the
my
group.
gosh, look at us.
Yeah.
So Rent came out when I was a junior in high school, and I'm telling you, we were obsessed. We were obsessed with Rent. As in, like, I remember. Now, I went to a math and science high school. I went to a very academic high school. We were all very good kids, but I cut class at Stuyvesant High School to go to J&R Music World downtown and stand in a line that looped around the block to get the Rent CD, the double disc CD. The day that it
I
came
remember.
out. Not that I needed the double disc CD because I was already on America Online chat rooms getting bootlegs of Rent.
Wow.
Trading. So I was a real theater, like, nerdy kid. And so I bootlegs.
Yeah.
Bootlegs. I'll trade you my Elaine Page bootleg of Sunset Boulevard for original Broadway. I mean, this was like what was going on. I'll trade you Howard McGillen and Phantom of the Opera for, the second act of Rent with Sherry Renee Scott, who's her first show. Like, that's what was happening. Like, in AOL chat rooms, if the modem worked and you got to sign on,
Exactly.
so like, and if mom didn't pick up the phone and kicked you off AOL, like that was sort of like but yeah, so I was obsessed with that show. And I remember even like freshman year going to Carnegie Mellon, all of us musical theater majors, we knew every word to Rent. We were the loud kids on campus singing Rent in the cafeteria because we were just loud, annoying freshman musical theater majors. It was sort of a stereotype, there goes those music theater majors singing Rent on campus.
Well, it was the sign of the times, It was. Everyone, it changed the game, that show.
And then, every generation sort of has that show, right? So, like, for my generation, it was Rent. The generation before me, it might have been Les Mis was that show. Mm-hmm. The generation before Hair was that show in the 70s, and later on, after me, Wicked would be that show for a generation of women and boys, actually, not just women, but like Spring Awakening was that show, and now Hamilton's that show. That's the show that was going to bring people into the theater. If you didn't like Broadway before, you're going to like this. And I felt like Rent served that. It was a cultural phenomenon, not just for the theater folks, right? And so by the time, fast forward 10 years, I'm actually doing Godspell at the Paper Mill Playhouse, and I'm dressing roommates with Robin DeJesus. And Robin's like, I love Robin. He's just like, so Telly, I'm leaving this show. I'm leaving Rent because I'm going to go do this musical. It's all in rap. This guy, Lin-Manuel Miranda, wrote it. We're going to do like an off-Broadway run, but it's really good. You want to hear? He had demos of In the Heights. So we would like listen to In the Heights demos during that run of Godspell. I'd be like, this is really good. I was like, some guy my age wrote this? I can't believe that. Like, he went to Wesleyan? What? And also he was like, hey, I'm about to leave Rent. There's an opening for you. Robin DeJesus also, ironically, Joshua Henry. That was Joshua Henry's first job out of college, out of UMiami. And he was like, hey, Joshua, you're perfect for In the Heights. That was Joshua Henry's first show. So Robin DeJesus deserves 10% of his agent fee because Robin was like, I'm leaving. You need to put your ring in the hat for Rent. And I was like, Rent? That's like my dream show. I would love to do that. And I remember the stage manager teaching me the show. I had 3 weeks to learn my ensemble track and also learn the Angel Understudy track. And I learned it in like 3 days. And Crystal, who had been the
stage
manager,
you knew every word of it.
She was like, are you sure you've never done this show? And I was like, I did this show in my brain.
Yes.
For the last 10 years of my life. I know every word.
So
every
good.
Word.
It's so great. Well, that's
probably,
forever on video now. People can see that forever and ever, which is so wonderful.
I mean, for me, it means so much that was filmed live at the Nederlander because, listen, I would not be here today had it not been seeing Bernadette Peters, Chip Zien, Joanna Gleason, that whole company in Into the Woods.
Yeah.
So so that the accessibility of seeing a Broadway show, but not on Broadway and televised was how I got into theater. So now I'm in that. I'm in that thing
so true.
that like people generations from now will go, watching Rent filmed live on Broadway is what made me want to do theater. Like I'm part of that now. You know, there's no words for that.
I mean, you've been part of many like moments like that. I want to talk about Allegiance, amazing musical. There you are. This show centers around a Japanese American family during Pearl Harbor, which caused a big divide in how the U.S. viewed Asian Americans. Sadly, this story feels more relevant than ever due to rising xenophobia against Asians and Asian Americans during this pandemic. And can you share your thoughts on that? Just, you know, how resonant it is still?
It's very resonant, and I wish we would have learned from our history, but we haven't as a society. I mean, I thought we did, you know, when, after that the horrific event of the internment happened, which was egregious on Americans' rights. I mean, like many civil liberties were broken if you're going to force people out of their homes purely based on prejudice and fear and war hysteria. You know, that's all it was. It was based on fear. You know, there was no real reason to suspect that, you know, the people that had been in this country for generations, that had farmed the land in California, you know, children that were, you know, George Takei, who the show is inspired by, this is his legacy project. He was 5 years old. That 5-year-old kid is not a spy for Japan. And neither is that 90-year-old grandma that you're going to put into that internment camp. It's so, you know, it was sort of a, you know, I wish we would have learned from that period in history. And of course, in the 80s, Ronald Reagan actually officially apologized to the Japanese community for that event happening and deemed it a mistake by the American government. But unfortunately, we don't have the kind of leadership that's going to learn from our mistakes. We don't have that here in the United States. And so we don't have empathy in our leadership. We don't have any sort of leadership that knows their history. Because for me, I think knowing our history is a way forward. Learning from our past mistakes, learning from our ancestors, learning from those who have paved the way for us. That is how we make better decisions for our future, and that hasn't happened. And you know, on a personal level, you know, when you have the government leaders calling it the China virus or the Kung flu, you know, these names that have no place in the dialogue of a serious pandemic where over 200,000 people have died now in the United States, that, you know, the only reason you would do that is to scapegoat your own inability to lead. You know, it is covering your own insecurity and your own culpability in what has happened. You decide to deflect and blame and scapegoat and blame somebody else. But, you know that the American people see through it. And also know that it's doing more harm than good. My parents, who live in Brooklyn, they live in a predominantly Chinese neighborhood in Brooklyn. They're scared to walk around the corner.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, Mom and Dad, like, take a walk. You know, it's COVID. I know we're all locked in our homes and all that, but make sure you get a little exercise, walk around. They go, I'm scared something's going to happen to me because people are getting beat up on the streets for no reason. You know, in Brooklyn, there was a grandma. She was in her 90s, and they had beat her up. And, you know, it took a lot of protesting by young Asian Americans that got out on the streets and said, this is a hate crime. Treat this as a hate crime. And, like, if you catch the guy that did it, you know what I mean? Like, it should be treated as a hate crime. So I am distraught by the rhetoric. I am cautiously optimistic that rhetoric will change when we have better leadership in November. That is what my hope in January, you know, of next year. Yeah. That really is my hope. And I hope it's a landslide victory for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris, who will be our first Asian vice president. I mean, come on, like it's huge,
It's
you know,
huge.
to have that representation, you know.
Yeah, I mean, the representation is just so important for, yeah, as as a young person, being able to see that, in our world on Broadway, it's so rare to see a Broadway company on stage that showcases Asian American actors. It's comes once a decade,
Yeah. What
and
was and what was special about Allegiance is it was one of those shows where it wasn't Asian people on a Broadway stage as foreigners,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
We were an
American,
Asian American
yeah,
family that was going through a very so in many ways you can come into the theater, sit in the seat, look at us, and by the color of our skin think that we're foreigners, which is
yeah,
exactly what happened in the 1940s that caused the internment. But by the end of the play, you go, oh my gosh, they're Americans, or their family is just like my family. And
yeah,
that sort of was our goal, was to go, and isn't that the goal of all theater, right? Is to find what's universal between all of us, being very specific with the storytelling and being authentic with the storytelling, but really getting the audience to feel that we really are all one, that we all are part of a bigger family, which is the human family, and that we all go through the same things, no matter what
yeah,
our skin color
yeah,
is. And that was sort of has always been the goal of Allegiance when we did it, was to tell a very American story, and that this could happen to anyone.
yeah,
This could
yeah.
happen to any group.
It was such a special show. I feel so fortunate to have gotten to see
Yeah,
it.
and that one is also filmed as
Yeah,
well. So the amazing people at Broadway on Demand during this quarantine, they stayed. It's a new platform that you can download and subscribe to, but they did a whole pay-per-view event for Allegiance, and
yeah,
so we were really excited that they took it on, and and again it continues to allow people to see it beyond its Broadway run. So
yeah.
I'm really happy that was preserved.
Yeah, that show is really incredible. So most recently, you were back on Broadway playing the titular role in Aladdin. What was it like to lead such a mega hit show?
Yeah. It was. I felt like it was. Aladdin was my seventh Broadway show,
Uh-huh.
and I felt like everything I learned from the first six shows prepared me for that. Right. It is a daunting task. It is a difficult show physically
Hmm.
because right out of the gate, the first number Aladdin does is one jump, where he's literally jumping between moving carts, jumping off buildings, sliding down poles, and trying to sing a song and make it all look easy, right? Which is so like from the get go. I always tell young dancers this: please warm up. Like, don't. I know you're 21 and you can kick your leg without stretching, but please stretch, because there's gonna come a day where you don't stretch and you're not as young as you were, and so
Uh-huh.
and you're gonna hurt yourself. And on that show, I would do almost like a hit workout, so that my blood was going, my heart rate was going, I was sweating by the time I hit the stage. There was no warming up into that show. So
Yeah.
I found that to be the biggest challenge, and also the challenge of leading a company, which I think is huge. That company had the wonderful benefit of two amazing leading men in James Monroe Iglehart and Adam Jacobs, phenomenal leading men who were brilliant on stage, wonderful people off stage. So I had big shoes to fill for sure. Coming into that, and I tried my best to do it in my way, and be as open and as gracious, and to lead by example as much as I could on that show. But it's also a wonderful company, the
Yeah.
whole company, not just the actors on stage that I got to share scenes with on stage and songs with, but that crew, that New Amsterdam theater crew is unbelievable. You know this from doing
Mhm.
many Broadway Cares events, that New Amsterdam crew is
Yeah,
top
they're
notch,
amazing.
wonderful, wonderful, wonderful folks, top to bottom. And what I also love is that the Disney folks, the New Amsterdam Theater, then there's a whole other theater that's on top of that, where back in the
Yeah.
day it was the risque, it was the risque follies up there, but now that's the Disney offices. So you also have sometimes people that are that would drift down and come watch the show. I remember I just did one of these virtual readings during quarantine. I did with Rick Ellis, phenomenal book writer, Jersey Boys and the Cher Show and all of that. Rick was like, I was working on a project at Disney, and I would sometimes just come downstairs during a Wednesday matinee and see you in the show. And I love that. I love that the folks from the
Yeah.
office would drift down and just stand in the back, of the New Amsterdam and watch a matinee. And so it was really great. It was a wonderful experience. I did the show for almost 2 years,
Uh-huh.
and and I loved every minute of it. And it's I what I miss most about that is the company. It's a really good group of people. Like, I loved going to work every day. I loved it.
That's wonderful. In addition to being a superstar performer, you're also a teacher. You coach a lot of young talent for the gym. There you are, pointing, being very bossy. You teach at NYU. Can you talk a little bit about why you're so passionate about fostering the next generation of theater artists?
Well, Dev, you teach too. Like, I would not be where I am without amazing teachers that have helped me and believed in me sometimes before I even saw it in myself. People like Billy Porter. I have an amazing voice teacher, Liz Kaplan. I have to give her a shout out. There's a phenomenal teacher in high school that I went to, Stuyvesant High School, which is a math and science high school. This teacher, his name is Vinny Grasso from Brooklyn. Vinny Grasso, he taught mechanical drafting and engineering, but he loved musical theater, and he volunteered his time to direct the musical after school and teach people how to build sets. So all of that mechanical drafting was like, this is how you build the sets. And like, he volunteered. That was just him, because he loved being with us, and he loved helping us put on a show. So teachers like that, I've had phenomenal teachers. And I also feel like, for me, I have found I get as much of a rush and a high in a classroom than as I do on stage. So for me, I know that I love performing, and I continue to perform, and I think I'll never let it go. But I have always sort of seen myself as a 70-30 teacher, like performer, like 70% performer, 30% teacher. And I sort of feel as I get older, that ratio will probably switch. Like, I'll probably go into full-time teaching a lot more, because I enjoy it. I really, really enjoy it.
And you're a great teacher. I've been fortunate to get to see you in action, and it's, you inspire so many people. So I anyone who has a chance to work with Telly in that capacity.
That was really fun. That day at Stella was really, really fun, actually, to do that.
Well, we'll definitely have you back soon. So, our mission at Live and in Color is to connect diverse communities to create new stage works. What does having a diverse working environment mean to you?
Well, Dev, we've talked about this, right? Like, we've talked about, which is, I remember when you started this company, and you said it was born out of being a director of color and being or being in production meetings and being a choreographer of color and being the only person of color in a production meeting at the end of a tech rehearsal, and going, there's something that's not right about this, especially since we are the theater. The reason why I got in theater is because in high school, before I ever decided to do this as a professional, to me, it was my tribe. This is where I found that it is it was the most inclusive place to be. It was where everybody was accepted. Best idea wins. Let your freak flag fly. We respect you for who you are. That is the tenement that theater rests upon, which I think makes it so attractive to so many people. That's why Glee was so popular, right? It was a classroom full of misfits that didn't belong anywhere, but you belonged somewhere. Well, if we're gonna live up to that, then we have to live up to that in the commercial theater world too. So where is that representation? Where are we welcoming all the voices that deserve to be heard in that room at all times? And I think it's interesting, this COVID-19 is awful, and it is, again, I can't, my heart goes out to the 200,000 plus people that have passed in America. That's just in America, right? And their families. So all those 200,000 people then are connected to another whole network of people. It's a terrible thing that has happened, but it has also allowed us to really slow down and assess all together and examine some of the structural things that make it so that our world doesn't have that kind of representation.
Yeah.
Right? That that's the world on a macro level, and then that's our theater world on a micro level. Our theater world sort of is very much, has structural things too that don't make it easy for people like you and me to have our voices heard all the time. And they're structural, So, I mean, I remember being a little kid and growing up, with immigrant parents who are from China. And I had that talk. My parents would sit me down and go, you are Chinese American and you are a minority in this country. And when you're a little kid, you're like, what's minority? I don't know what that means. They go, well, you look different than most people in this country, which means you might have to work a little harder. Like and you have to give, and when it's time for you to interview for a job, when it's time for you to go to an audition, when it's time for you to, put yourself out there, you have to give them no reason to not hire you. You have to give them no reason to not cast you in a play. And so, that's what I grew up with. I felt like that's sort of what I did my whole life, was adopt that way of working. I think what's happening now in 2020 with all of us re-examining racial and social structures is going, why have I been forced to do that my entire life?
Yeah.
Is why that's not right? In a country where we are proud of our equality and our equity, are we really delivering on that? And I would say the same thing of the theater world, for a world that preaches how inclusive we are and what a community we are. Are we really a community if we don't embrace all of the voices in that community?
It's
so
true.
I think it's a work in progress, right? Like, we're not done. We're not going to solve racism by 2021. It's just not going to happen. Like, we're not going to solve prejudice and racial bias in 2021. But the work that we have to put in every day and minute by minute, I think that's, and it's hard. It's going to be hard work because these structures are embedded in our brain. These preconceived notions are embedded in the structures of how we work. But I think if we continue to talk about it, we are doing that work. If we continue to talk about it and to take the actions necessary to make sure that there is equity and as best as we can in a situation. And, as terrible as COVID is, COVID allowed that. It allowed us the space and the time to do that. Because if COVID had never happened and the world was still spinning as quickly as it did, we would have never stopped to examine.
Well, yeah, it's so true. I mean, as you said, we have been talking about it forever. I'm glad that the rest of the world is finally talking about it.
No, don't get it twisted. This conversation happens between us.
And in fact, we could probably talk about this all night. We are like so close to out of time, but I want to make sure we get in some questions from viewers quickly. Alyssa says, "What was the best advice you ever received? Thank you so much."
Okay, so when I talked about Vinny Grasso, my high school mechanical drafting teacher who taught theater after school, he gave me the best advice ever, which is, he's like, "Telly, you're an actor." He's like, "But you have to know that it doesn't matter if you're the star of the show with your name in lights, or if it is your job to sweep the stage every night, and that is your job. Everybody's job in the theater is important, and everybody's job deserves respect, because theater is an art form that requires the coming together of many people. If you were a sculptor, you could lock yourself in a room with a brick, piece of marble, come out with a piece of art all by yourself. Theater doesn't work that way. An actor is only as good as the writer who's written the script, the director who's directed the scenes, the lighting designer who's going to light you, or else you're acting in the dark. That person sweeping the stage every night, and that is their job. That is important, because otherwise you're going to be on a dirty stage. That person collecting the tickets is the first person that interacts with the audience member, and if that person doesn't do their job well, that audience is already sitting there having a bad time, right? Yeah. So you have to understand that it is all connected, and that everybody's job is important, and everybody's job deserves respect. And I think that has taken me a long way in this industry, and I say that to all of my young theater students too.
And I think that goes beyond even our industry. I mean, in any industry.
Any industry, but especially our industry that depends on like everybody working together.
Let's take one more question if we have one.
Yeah.
Robert Duran says, "I saw you in Godspell. What was it like?"
Probably improvising. Yeah. Godspell was in 2012, and during the run of Godspell was an election. So every day there was some sort of breaking news. Every day was some quote because it was a Republican primary at the time before they landed on Mitt Romney. But every day there was something that we could. So very unique. Our director, Daniel Goldstein, really trusted the actors that he cast on that stage to go, "Yeah, guys, like it's on you. So, if there's a joke you want to change for the night, you guys work it out, talk to stage management, make it happen." Now, scary, because there's no preview process for stuff like that.
Yeah.
So if something had just happened in the Republican primary debates the night before, I go, that's funny. I could do a Rick Perry impression. Hold on. Then you text. I text my castmates and go, hey, that moment that I have with you, Uzo, can we try this tomorrow night? Okay. We tell stage manager about it the next night. We're gonna try this line. Don't be surprised if you have to call a light cue or something on that. Don't be shocked. But sometimes we would do it, and sometimes you would get a great laugh because it was so current, and then sometimes it would be like wah wah wah, and you would like it would get crickets, no laugh. During Godspell, because the whole show is improv based. Anyway, the whole show was built on improv, right? Like even in the rehearsal process, we built sort of how we wanted to tell those parables in 2011, in our 2011 world. That was different from the 70s version, right? So, we had what we called a graveyard backstage. Any of the bits that we would try that would fall flat or not get laughs or be not funny or be like that awkward, like, oh God, that joke was bad. That didn't land. We would have to put it up on the graveyard ourselves.
That's
It was almost like the Joe Allens of jokes in a lot of ways. Like, Joe Allen, you like have to put up, the producer has to bring in the poster of their flop show and like put it on the wall.
Yes.
Well, we had that on our call board of every joke that never worked during Godspell, rehearsals or anything. And everybody made the board. Even Steven Schwartz made the board. And he wrote the show. So Steven Schwartz tried to write like a musical parable. It didn't work. And so we put him on the board. We're like, Steven, you're going on the board. Like, and it was humble. It's humbling. It's a humbling experience to go, we all land our laughs, and then we all have moments where we don't. Mm-hmm. And it's okay. It's human. Embrace it, laugh at it, and move on. Tomorrow night, come up with a better one. You know what I mean?
That's a great way to live. Telly, we are out of time, but before we go, I want to remind everyone that you only have 7 more days to help Live and in Color raise $10,000 to reach our $20,000 match for our Put Artists Back to Work campaign. All money raised goes towards paying our artists for the new virtual work we are developing. For more information, go to theaterincolor.org. Also, be sure to be tuned in to be our guest next week when I have a very special interview with the team behind an amazing theater company, Musical Theater Factory, an organization that is making art to make change. I'm talking to Artistic Director Mayan Teo and Managing Director Aaron Sally. They are doing incredible work and are always wonderful to talk to. Thank you to everyone who tuned in today. And thank you, Telly. I am always happy to see you. So excited for everything you do. I am in complete awe of your immense talent, and I'm proud to call you a friend and a colleague. Will you lead us in a little toast before we say goodbye?
Yes. So I would like to toast, especially with everything that's happening in the news. Mm-hmm. I would like to toast justice. That at some point, we may not see it now, but I do feel like we will get it at some point. And that, I know John Lewis has I've had a couple glasses of wine, so John Lewis's quote about justice is not going to come to me. But I do feel that I have faith in our country. I have faith in who we are as Americans. And to me, I feel like we will get to a better day. We will get to a better time. We have to be patient. We have to keep fighting. So to justice.
Justice, here. Thank you, Telly. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon.